Imagine a bank vault, right? Like a massive, highly secure bank vault where the door is made of solid, reinforced titanium.
Oh yeah, like a 2-ton door.
Exactly. But the walls holding that door are made of tissue paper.
Right.
I mean, that is exactly how most computer networks operate today. We poured, like, billions of dollars into these massive, complex digital locks. But we entirely misunderstand the actual architecture of the building we're trying to secure.
We really do. It's wild.
So, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are taking a dense stack of IT architecture and security frameworks, specifically the core documentation surrounding Windows security and CompTIA A protocols.
Which is usually incredibly dry stuff, honestly.
It really is.
Yeah.
But we are extracting the absolute foundation of digital survival from it. And the mission for this deep dive is to basically decode the philosophy of cybersecurity.
Yeah, we're taking those rigid IT rules and turning them into, like, actual aha moments for you.
Exactly, because it is a critical shift in perspective.
Right, because we tend to think of digital security as a product you can buy, like a firewall, an antivirus subscription, or a piece of software that just magically makes you safe.
Just install this and you're good?
Exactly. But what we are really doing when we unpack this source material is exploring a philosophy. We are looking at a continuous, invisible negotiation of trust.
I love that phrase, negotiation of trust.
It's so true, though. Every single time you open your laptop, swipe a badge, or check your email, you are participating in a massive mathematical and logical debate.
A debate about whether you are who you claim to be.
Right, and whether you actually have the right to touch the data you are asking for.
And for you listening, this isn't just about understanding how your corporate IT department works. I mean, this is about decoding the underlying logic of the digital world you live in.
Absolutely.
So we are going to explore everything from the, like, pessimistic default states of computer networks to the literal mathematics of keeping a secret over public wires.
And all the way to modern, paranoid architectures where the perimeter has completely dissolved.
It's going to be fascinating. We are keeping it structured, but we are going deep into the mechanisms, like the how and the why behind these systems.
And we really have to start with the baseline, right?
Right.
Before we can even talk about firewalls or encryption algorithms, we have to define what secure actually means.
Because if we don't know what we're protecting, the rest is pointless.
Exactly. So in the security architecture world, there is a foundational model, a kind of holy trinity, called the CIA Triad.
Right. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And obviously, we aren't talking about the intelligence agency here.
No, definitely not.
This is the framework that dictates, like, every single decision a security engineer makes. So let's break these down, but let's go beyond the textbook definitions.
Let's do it.
So confidentiality is the one everyone intuitively understands. It's the velvet rope bouncer. If you aren't on the VIP list, you don't get to see what's inside the club.
Right. It's about keeping data hidden from unauthorized eyes. But it's actually more nuanced than just keeping secrets,
How so?
Well, confidentiality is about data state control across data at rest, data in transit, and data in use.
Okay, break that down for me.
So if a hospital holds your medical records, confidentiality isn't just about stopping a hacker in another country from downloading the database.
Right, that's the obvious part.
Yeah, but it is also about ensuring that the receptionist in the lobby cannot access your specific oncology report while your attending physician can.
Oh, okay.
It is highly granular, context-aware secrecy.
Which brings us to the second pillar, which is integrity. And this is not just that the data is hidden, it's that the data is trustworthy.
Yes, trust is key.
My favorite way to visualize this from the material is the wax seal on a royal letter back in the medieval era.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. So the king writes a letter to his general on the front lines, drips the wax, and stamps his ring into it. Now, that seal doesn't stop a spy from reading the letter if they intercept the messenger.
Because that would be confidentiality.
Exactly. What the wax seal does is guarantee that the spy didn't open the letter, change the orders from hold the line to retreat immediately, and then put it back in the envelope.
Right.
If the wax is broken, the integrity is destroyed. The general knows not to trust the message.
And the modern digital equivalent of that wax seal is what prevents catastrophic financial manipulation.
Like wire transfers.
Exactly. When you transfer $10,000 for a house down payment, integrity ensures that a man-in-the-middle attacker doesn't intercept the data packet, change the destination routing number to their own offshore account, and just pass it along.
Because if the integrity of the transaction is compromised, the entire financial system basically collapses.
It absolutely does.
Then we have the third pillar, which I think is often the forgotten stepchild of security, right? Availability.
Oh, 100% forgotten.
The velvet rope and the wax seal don't matter if the club is burned to the ground. Availability means the two-focolated diner is actually open when you are hungry. The data and the systems just have to be accessible to authorized users when they actually need them.
And this is where the real architecture begins, because there is an inherent, inescapable tension between these three pillars.
Let's fight each other.
They are in a constant state of war with one another. If you maximize one, you almost always degrade another.
Walk me through that tension. Give me a scenario where they are fighting.
Okay, let's say your organization decides that confidentiality is the absolute paramount goal. The data must never, ever be breached.
The absolute priority.
Right. So the most effective way to achieve 100% confidentiality is to take your server, unplug it from the internet, unplug it from the local network, encase it in a cubic yard of concrete, and literally drop it into the Mariana Trench.
Right. Perfect confidentiality. No hacker on Earth is getting that data.
Exactly. But your availability has just dropped to absolute zero.
Right, because nobody can use it.
The authorized users, the people who need that data to do their jobs, cannot access it. The system is perfectly secure and completely useless.
That makes total sense.
On the flip side, let's say you prioritize availability above all else. You want your employees to access their files instantly, from any device, anywhere in the world, with no passwords, no multi-factor authentication, no VPNs. Your availability is incredible.
And your confidentiality is zero, because literally anyone on the internet can just walk right in.
Precisely. This triad isn't a checklist, it's a series of sliders on a soundboard.
I like that. Sliders.
Cybersecurity is basically the art of tuning those sliders based on the specific context of the business. You accept a little less convenience, lower availability to gain a critical amount of confidentiality. You introduce friction on purpose.
Okay, so if the goal is tuning those sliders to find the perfect balance, we have to talk about how things actually go wrong. How do we lose control of the CIA triad?
And this introduces a three-part equation.
Yes, and I hear these misused in corporate environments constantly. People throw these words around like they are synonyms. Vulnerability, threat, and risk.
Oh, all the time.
But architecturally, they are distinctly different variables in an equation.
They absolutely are. So a vulnerability is a flaw or a weakness in your system. It is a passive state.
Passive.
A threat is an actor or an event that has the potential to exploit that weakness. And risk is the calculated probability of that threat successfully exploiting that vulnerability, multiplied by the impact it would cause. Risk is the ultimate business metric.
Okay, let's role play this to make the mechanics clear for you listening.
Yeah.
Let's say I'm an executive. I'm working on the finalized merger and acquisition documents for a multi-billion-dollar buyout.
Okay, high stakes.
Very high stakes. I take my corporate laptop to a bustling downtown coffee shop because I want to change the scenery. I sit down, open the spreadsheet, authenticate into the network. Then I realize I forgot to grab a napkin.
Classic mistake.
I leave the laptop wide open, unlocked, and walk 30 feet away to the condiment bar. What is the vulnerability in this exact moment?
Well, the vulnerability is multi-layered. Physically, the laptop is unattended in a public space. Logically, the machine is in an authenticated state with no screen lock engaged.
So it's just sitting there.
Yeah, the vulnerability is the open window. It is the absence of a control.
Okay, so the open window is the vulnerability. What is the threat?
The threat is the guy sitting at the table next to you who recognizes the M&A document on your screen.
Right.
The threat is an active entity with intent. It could be a corporate spy or just an opportunistic thief who wants the hardware. It could even be environmental. Like a threat could be someone tripping and spilling a massive iced coffee directly onto the motherboard.
Oh, wow, yeah.
The threat is the external force capable of interacting with your vulnerability.
Got it. So the open window is the vulnerability. The burglar outside is the threat. Yeah. So how do we actually calculate the risk?
Risk is the intersection of the two. We calculate it by asking, what is the likelihood of the threat actor exploiting the vulnerability, and what is the severity of the impact?
Okay.
So in your coffee shop scenario, the likelihood is incredibly high because it's a crowded public space and you walked away. The impact is catastrophic because an unannounced M&A deal leaking could tank stock prices and incur massive SEC fines.
So it's worst case scenario.
High likelihood times catastrophic impact equals a critical risk rating. Now, if you did the exact same thing, left the laptop open and unlocked, but you were in your private locked home office with no one else around.
The vulnerability is exactly the same.
Yes, the vulnerability is the same, but the threat environment is near zero, meaning the calculated risk is very low.
So the entire job of a security architect is basically to manipulate that risk equation. You try to lower the vulnerability or lower the threat exposure to bring the overall risk down to an acceptable level. And to do that, we deploy security controls. Now, the source material breaks these into three categories, right? Physical, technical, and administrative.
That's right.
Physical controls are obvious. Fences, security guards, biometric locks on the server room door. Because if someone can physically steal the hard drive, your software firewalls are totally irrelevant.
Exactly. Physical access negates logical security 9 times out of 10. If I have your laptop in my hands, I own it.
Right. And technical controls, which are also called logical controls, are the digital enforcers. The firewalls, the antivirus, the encryption algorithms. But it's that middle category, administrative controls, where I think things get heavily debated.
Oh, definitely.
These are the written policies. The acceptable use policy you sign on day one. The password rotation rules in the employee handbook. I'm going to challenge this right now. Aren't administrative controls fundamentally useless?
I love this argument.
I mean, it's just a piece of paper. A written policy in an HR binder cannot physically or digitally stop a hacker from executing a phishing campaign against your employees.
That is the exact argument every frustrated engineer makes when they are forced to write documentation. Why am I writing a policy when I should be configuring the firewall?
Exactly.
But that view completely misunderstands how enterprise architecture functions. Administrative controls are the master blueprint.
The blueprint. Okay.
Without them, technical controls are just arbitrary roadblocks with absolutely no legal or structural backing.
How so? Connect the piece of paper to the firewall for me.
Okay, let's take a password policy. The administrative control is a document approved by the board of directors that states all user accounts must utilize a minimum 14-character password, which must be rotated every 90 days.
Okay, pretty standard.
You are correct that the paper itself stops no one. But that policy is the mandate that gives the IT department the authority to implement the technical control. The IT administrator takes that written policy, opens up Microsoft Active Directory, and configures the domain controllers to mathematically reject any password shorter than 14 characters.
So the paper tells the computer what to do.
Exactly. And if a user complains to HR that the system won't let them use the word password 123, HR points to the administrative control.
I see. So it establishes the legal and procedural baseline.
Exactly. Furthermore, administrative controls establish accountability. If you have an acceptable use policy that explicitly forbids installing unapproved third-party software, and an employee installs a shadow IT application that causes a massive data breach,
The company has grounds to fire them.
the company has grounds for termination and legal protection. The administrative control governs the human behavior, which is honestly the most chaotic element of the entire system.
Which is the perfect pivot because all of these physical locks and technical firewalls ultimately collide with that exact chaotic element.
The human being.
Yes, the user. We have to talk about how systems manage human beings. This is the domain of identity and access management, or IAM. And the source makes it clear this isn't just a login box. It's a rigorous, multi-stage pipeline.
It really is a pipeline.
The architecture breaks this down into 4 sequential steps, right? Identification, authentication, authorization, and accounting or access control. And people blur these together constantly.
They do, and blurring them creates massive security loopholes. Let's separate them. Step 1 is identification. This is just a claim.
The claim, okay.
It is you walking up to a building and saying, "Hello, my name is John Smith." In the digital world, this is you typing your username or swiping a badge. You are asserting an identity. But crucially, at the stage, the system does not believe you.
It just hears you.
Right, it just acknowledges your claim.
Because I could type John Smith's username just as easily as he can, which forces step 2, authentication. The system basically says, okay, prove it.
Yes. Authentication is the challenge. The system demands evidence that only the true owner of that identity could possess.
Like a password.
This is the password, the biometric scan, the cryptographic token on your phone. If the evidence provided matches the stored profile for John Smith, the system changes your state. You are now authenticated. The system believes you are who you say you are.
But, and this is the vital distinction from the material, just because the system believes you are John Smith doesn't mean John Smith is allowed to do whatever he wants.
Exactly.
That's step 3, authorization.
Precisely. Authentication is about who you are. Authorization is about what you are allowed to do. You might be fully authenticated into the corporate network, but your authorization profile dictates that you can only read the files in the marketing folder, and you are expressly forbidden from accessing the HR payroll database.
So the bouncer knows you are legally 21, so you get in the front door, which is authentication. But your ticket doesn't give you access to the VIP lounge in the back, which is authorization.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And this all leads to the overarching tension of IAM, right? Balancing this immense friction with human productivity. Because if you force a user to re-authenticate and wait for authorization checks every single time they open a new spreadsheet, they will riot.
Oh, they absolutely will. They will find workarounds, which destroys your security posture.
Which is why the architecture of where this identity lives is so important. If we look at the Windows ecosystem specifically, the foundation of this is the user account. And historically, we lived in a world of local accounts.
Right.
A local account is an island. The security credentials, like the username and the mathematical representation of the password, are stored directly on the physical hard drive of that specific laptop, usually in a database called the SAM file, right?
The security account manager, yes.
So if I take my laptop to a coffee shop without internet, I can still log in because the bouncer lives inside the laptop. But if I walk over to my coworker's computer in the next cubicle, I can't log in there because that computer SAM file has no idea who I am.
Because the local account provides absolute isolation. It doesn't phone home. It doesn't sync your telemetry to a cloud provider. For highly secure air-gapped systems, like a computer controlling a manufacturing laser or a submarine, local accounts are essential.
Because they can't be reached from the outside.
Right. But in a modern fluid workspace, they are an administrative nightmare. If you forget your local password and you haven't set up very specific recovery media, getting back into that machine is incredibly difficult by design.
Which drove the massive shift toward connected identities, like the Microsoft account. The identity no longer lives on the laptop's hard drive, it lives in the cloud.
Exactly. You are authenticating against a remote server. The massive advantage here is portability and disaster recovery.
Yeah, if my laptop dies.
If your hard drive corrupts, you buy a new device, connect to the internet, type your credentials, and the cloud pushes your identity, your desktop background, your BitLocker recovery keys, and your OneDrive files straight down to the new metal. The identity has been totally decoupled from the hardware. It's federated.
It's so convenient. But regardless of whether the bouncer lives on the hard drive or in the cloud, once you are in, we run into the rules of the house. And this introduces a concept that I find endlessly fascinating from a philosophical standpoint. It's the mechanism that handles authorization. They're called access control lists, or ACLs.
An ACL is essentially a digital clipboard hanging on the door of every single file, folder, and application in an operating system.
Just a big list.
It explicitly lists the users or groups of users and the specific permissions they have. So read, write, modify, execute, or full control.
Here's the philosophical part that struck me from the source text. The foundational rule of these lists in almost every modern security architecture is a concept called implicit deny.
Yes.
Think about the sheer pessimism of that phrase. In the American justice system, you are innocent until proven guilty. But in a computer network, implicit deny means you are guilty. Like you are unauthorized and blocked by default unless you can produce a specific rule that proves you are allowed in.
It's very paranoid.
Why did we build networks to be so deeply untrusting?
Well, we built them that way because we learned the hard way that the alternative is catastrophic.
What's the alternative?
The opposite of implicit deny is implicit allow, where everything is open by default and the administrator only writes rules to block bad things. In the early days of networking, many firewalls and file systems operated a lot closer to that model.
And how did that go?
It was a nightmare. In a modern enterprise with millions of files and thousands of employees, it is mathematically impossible for an IT team to anticipate and block every single combination of user and restricted file. If you use implicit allow, you will inevitably forget to block the summer intern from the CEO's unreleased earnings report.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would be bad. So implicit deny flips the burden of proof.
Exactly. The system locks every single door in the entire building by default. The only way a door opens is if an administrator intentionally, explicitly writes a rule saying, give this specific user the key to this specific door.
If there's a conflict?
If a rule conflicts or the system gets confused, it fails safely, it fails closed, the door remains locked. It is the ultimate defensive architecture.
And that defensive posture cascades directly into the most important rule of authorization, which is The principle of least privilege, or PoLP. This is the idea that a user should be granted the absolute bare minimum permissions required to perform their daily tasks and not a single privilege more.
It is entirely about limiting the blast radius.
The blast radius.
Yeah, if we go back to our earlier discussion about threats, we have to assume that eventually a user will make a mistake. A receptionist will click on a highly sophisticated phishing email, and a threat actor will compromise their account.
It's inevitable.
If you follow the principle of least privilege, that threat actor inherits the receptionist's permissions. They can read emails and open the calendar app. They cannot install a keylogger. They cannot access the domain controller. They cannot disable the antivirus because the receptionist's token does not have those privileges. The blast radius is contained.
But if the IT department got lazy and gave the receptionist an administrator account just to avoid dealing with permission requests,
Then the moment that phishing link is clicked, the threat actor inherits full, unrestricted control of the machine and likely a foothold to pivot across the entire network. Game over.
just because of bad permission management. This brings us to how Windows actually manages these privileges structurally. Because instead of writing an ACL rule for every single employee, which would take centuries, Windows uses security groups. It clusters people. At the top of the pyramid, you have the administrators group. This is God mode, full control over the system state. Below that, you have the standard users group.
And standard users are where 99% of human beings should live for 99% of their computing lives.
Really?
Oh yeah. A standard user can run applications, browse the web, create documents, and change their desktop wallpaper. But they cannot alter system files, they cannot install software for all users, and they cannot change network configurations.
Now, managing these groups can be done visually. If you are an IT admin, you might use the local users and groups console, right? The lilsrmgr.mse snap-in. You get a nice graphical window. You can right-click, add people to groups, check boxes. But if you are deploying 100 machines, you aren't clicking through menus.
No, absolutely not. You are using the command line. Automation is critical. A command like netuser allows an administrator to script the creation of accounts and assignment of groups in milliseconds. You can write a PowerShell script that provisions an entire department's permissions instantly without a single mouse click.
Okay, so we've established that least privilege is the holy grail.
Yeah.
Everyone should operate as a standard user. But here is the massive usability problem. Let's say I am a highly responsible employee operating as a standard user, and I legitimately need to install a new driver for my printer so I can print a contract. Under strict least privilege, I would have to stop my work, log completely out of my standard account, log in with a separate administrator account, install the driver, log out of the admin account, and log back into my standard account.
It's exhausting just hearing it.
Right. That is so much friction that people will just refuse to work.
And that exact friction is what caused the IT industry to historically ignore the principle of least privilege. Throughout the Windows XP era, it was just too annoying to switch accounts, so companies just made everyone a local administrator.
And malware ran absolutely rampant.
Rampant, because the moment a virus executed, it executed with admin rights. Microsoft realized they had to solve the friction problem if they wanted to secure the OS. Their solution was user account control, or UAC.
Ah, UAC, the infamous pop-up.
People hated it.
The screen goes dark, a box appears and asks, do you want to allow this app to make changes to your device? People historically hated UAC when it debuted in Windows Vista. They thought it was just the computer nagging them. But looking at the architecture, UAC is arguably one of the most brilliant compromises in OS history.
It really is brilliant because of what it does under the hood. It isn't just a pop-up. UAC operates on a split token architecture. When you log into Windows, even if your account is in the administrators group, Windows does not give you your administrator badge.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it secretly strips away your administrative privileges and hands you a standard user token.
Wait, I want to emphasize this. Even if I am the admin, Windows forces me to run as a standard user in the background.
Exactly. Every time you open a web browser or read an email or open a PDF, those programs are running with the restricted standard token. Your admin powers are dormant. They are kept in a glass box.
So how do I get them back to install the printer?
The only way to break the glass is if an application explicitly requests elevation, or if you right-click and say Run as Administrator. When that request happens, the UAC process intercepts it. It pauses the entire operating system and switches you to the secure desktop. That's why the rest of the screen goes dim.
Oh, that's what the dimming is?
Yes, the secure desktop cannot be interacted with by standard software, which prevents malware from programmatically clicking yes for you.
So the computer pauses and essentially says, hey, a program is trying to use your dormant superpower. Are you a human? And did you actually ask for this?
Yes. If you initiated the printer install, you click yes. UAC hands the program the administrator token for that one specific task and then immediately puts the powers away again.
That's wild.
And think about the defensive side. If you were just reading an article online and suddenly the UAC prompt appears asking to install something, you know instantly that a malicious script just tried to compromise your machine. You click no, the request is dropped, and you just defeated the attack. UAC allows you to have the safety of least privilege without the friction of constantly logging in and out.
It is a masterful piece of engineering when you understand the mechanics. Okay, so we have built a robust authorization system. We have implicit deny, we have least privilege, we have UAC mitigating the friction, but all of this internal architecture is completely worthless if the initial authentication is compromised.
It all falls apart.
If a bouncer lets a burglar in because the burglar has a perfect counterfeit ID, the velvet ropes inside the club just don't matter. The system will gladly hand the burglar all the files because it thinks the burglar is you.
Which brings us to the most vulnerable point in any digital architecture, the password. The traditional something you know authentication factor. We have to confront the reality that the password is fundamentally, mathematically, and psychologically broken.
Let's dig into that. We've relied on passwords for decades. Why are they suddenly failing so spectacularly now?
It's a combination of human behavior and raw computational power. Humans are terrible at generating random entropy.
Entropy being randomness, right?
Right. When told to make a complex password, we use summer 2024. We capitalize the first letter, use a word we can remember, and put a symbol at the end. We reuse that exact same password across 40 different websites.
Guilty is charged.
Everyone does it. But if a threat actor breaches an obscure, poorly secured forum you signed up for 5 years ago, they take that password and immediately try it on your banking portal, your email, and your corporate VPN. It's called credential stuffing, and it is devastatingly effective.
And even if you use a totally unique password, if it isn't long enough, computers can just guess it through brute force. I saw a statistic recently about the speed of modern graphics cards, like GPUs, cracking hashes.
It's terrifying. A modern high-end GPU cluster can calculate tens of billions of password hashes per second. If your password is just 8 characters long, even if it has uppercase, lowercase numbers and symbols, a dedicated cracking rig can cycle through every single possible combination and find your password in a matter of hours, if not minutes. The math of a short secret no longer holds up to modern silicon.
So the industry realized that something you know is no longer sufficient evidence to prove identity. We had to evolve to multi-factor authentication, or MFA.
We had no choice.
The premise here is that you must present evidence from at least 2 different categories of authentication. We have something you know, which is the password. What are the others?
The next most common is something you have. This relies on physical possession. A threat actor in Russia might have purchased your compromised password on the dark web, but they do not physically possess the smartphone sitting in your pocket in New York. If the system requires both, the remote attacker is blocked.
Makes sense.
The third category is something you are, which involves biometrics like fingerprints, facial geometry, retina scans. This ties the identity to your biological state.
Let's focus on that something you have factor, because the architecture here has evolved rapidly in the source material, and not all MFA is created equal. For a long time, the standard was SMS-based 2-step verification. You type your password, the website sends a 6-digit text message to your phone, you type it in.
It was standard for a long time.
But security architects are actively trying to kill SMS verification. Why?
Because SMS authentication relies on the security of the cellular telecom network, which was never designed for identity verification. It is vulnerable to a devastating attack known as SIM swapping.
Okay, walk me through the mechanics of a SIM swap. How does an attacker steal a text message without stealing my physical phone?
They don't attack the phone, they attack the human element at your telecom provider. Let's say an attacker has your password and knows your bank uses SMS MFA. The attacker gathers some basic open source intelligence on you, like your address, the last 4 digits of your social security number from a previous data breach, your date of birth.
Stuff that's easy to find online.
Exactly. They call customer support at Verizon or AT&T pretending to be you. They use social engineering, they sound panicked. I lost my phone, I'm traveling, I need to port my number to this new SIM card immediately so I can call my family.
And if the customer service rep falls for it and processes the port,
The moment the rep hits enter, the physical phone in your pocket drops off the cellular network. You see no service in the top corner. Meanwhile, the attacker's phone connects to the network using your phone number.
Wait, they literally steal your phone number.
Yes. The attacker then logs into your bank. The bank's automated system sends the 6-digit MFA code via SMS. That text message routes through the telecom infrastructure and lands directly on the attacker's phone. They type it in, and your bank account is emptied. They completely bypass the something you have factor by exploiting the telecom infrastructure.
That is horrifying because you are entirely helpless in that scenario. Your security relies on a minimum wage customer service rep halfway across the country not getting tricked.
Exactly. It's a massive architectural flaw.
So what is the architectural upgrade? How do we fix the something you have
Sure.
factor?
We remove the telecom middleman entirely. We move to authenticator applications like Microsoft Authenticator, Google Authenticator, or Authy. These operate using algorithms like TOTP, which stands for time-based one-time passwords.
How does TOTP work mathematically to prevent interception?
When you first set up the app with a website, a secure channel is established, often by scanning a QR code. That QR code contains a complex, cryptographically secure string of data called a secret seed. Both the server and the app on your phone store this seed.
Okay, they both have the secret.
From that moment on, your phone does not need to connect to the cellular network or the internet to generate a code. The app on your phone takes that secret seed, combines it with the current exact time of day, and runs it through a cryptographic algorithm to generate a 6-digit code that changes every 30 seconds.
Because the server knows the secret seed and what time it is, it generates the exact same code on its end. If the code you type matches the code the server just generated, it proves you possess the device with the seed.
Exactly. And because the code is generated locally on the silicon of your phone, an attacker who performs a SIM swap and steals your phone number gets absolutely nothing. The codes are not being transmitted over the airwaves. They are happening inside the closed environment of the app.
That is so much better. But attackers adapt, right? If they can't SIM swap you, they try to exploit the human psychology of the app user. Let's talk about MFA fatigue attacks or push bombing. This is what breached Uber and several other massive corporations recently, right?
Yes, unfortunately, some authenticator apps use push notifications instead of making you type 6 digits. You log in, and your phone buzzes with a prompt. Approve login, yes or no. It's very convenient.
That's super easy.
But attackers realize they can abuse this. If they have your password, they will trigger a login attempt at 2:00 a.m. Your phone buzzes. You ignore it. They trigger it again and again and again. Your phone buzzes 50 times in a row.
You are half asleep, annoyed, and you just want the phone to stop buzzing so you can go back to sleep. So you hit approve.
And the moment you hit approve, the attacker is in. You just authenticated them. This is an attack on human endurance, not mathematics.
Yeah.
To architect a defense against this, the industry is moving toward number matching. When you log in, the computer screen displays a 2-digit number. Your phone buzzes, but instead of just a yes button, it gives you a keypad and requires you to type the number shown on the screen. If you are in bed and the attacker is at the computer, you don't know the number, so you cannot approve the prompt. It forces cognitive engagement.
That is a brilliant evolution.
Yeah.
But for the absolute highest levels of security, like military, core financial infrastructure, root domain administrators, even an app on a smartphone isn't secure enough because smartphones have vast attack surfaces. They can be infected with malware. The ultimate implementation of something you have is the hard token.
Yes, hardware tokens like the YubiKey or RSA Secured. These represent a shift to protocols like FIDO2 and WebAuthn. A YubiKey is a small, dedicated physical device that lives on your keychain. It has no battery, no screen, and no complex operating system that can be infected. It contains a highly secure microchip called a secure enclave.
When I plug a YubiKey into my USB port, what is actually happening mechanically?
It uses challenge response cryptography. When you attempt to log in, the server sends a complex mathematical puzzle, a challenge, down the USB cable into the YubiKey. The secure chip inside the key uses a private cryptographic key, which was generated on the hardware and can never be extracted or copied to solve the puzzle. It then signs the solution and sends it back to the server.
Okay, so it does the math for you.
But here is the critical security feature. The YubiKey will not send the solution until a physical human being reaches out and touches the gold contact pad on the device.
It demands proof of physical presence.
Exactly.
A remote hacker in another country could theoretically compromise my entire computer, have full remote control over my mouse and keyboard, but when the prompt asks for the YubiKey, they are paralyzed. They cannot physically reach through the screen to touch the gold pad on my desk.
Exactly. It completely breaks the attack chain of remote phishing and session hijacking. It bridges the physical world and the digital world in a way that is mathematically unforgeable.
Okay, this is incredible. We have locked down the identity, we have MFA, we have hard tokens, we have least privilege authorization. The endpoints are secure. But here is the massive hole in the architecture. What happens when the data leaves the secure endpoint?
The scary part.
Right. When you send that highly confidential M&A spreadsheet to your colleague, it travels across the public internet. It bounces through dozens of routers controlled by ISPs, governments, and potentially malicious actors. Any one of them could cap the wire and read the data. This brings us to the true magic of digital security, which is cryptography, the math of secrecy.
Cryptography is literally the only way we can trust an untrusted medium like the internet. We cannot protect the wire, so we must protect the data itself. We use mathematical algorithms to scramble plain text into incomprehensible ciphertext with the absolute mathematical guarantee that it can only be unscrambled by someone holding the correct key.
Let's start with the workhorse of cryptography, symmetric encryption. The textbook analogy for this is locking a box with a physical key.
It is a perfect analogy. Symmetric encryption uses a single shared secret key. If Alice wants to send a secure file to Bob, she uses a cryptographic algorithm, like AES, the Advanced Encryption Standard, and feeds it the data and her secret key. The algorithm scrambles the data. She sends the ciphertext to Bob. To read it, Bob must possess the exact same secret key. He feeds the ciphertext and the key into the algorithm in reverse, and the plain text pops out.
Let's talk about the mechanics of AES, because it's the standard used by the U.S. government, banks, and basically everyone. It replaced an older standard called DES, the Data Encryption Standard. Why did DES fail, and why is AES so strong?
It comes down to the key space and the architecture of the cipher. DES used a 56-bit key. In the 1970s, that was considered unbreakable, but computing power grew exponentially. By 1998, a group called the Electronic Frontier Foundation built a custom machine called Deep Crack for about $250,000. It simply brute-forced DES. It tried every single possible combination of 56 ones and zeros, and it cracked a DES message in 56 hours. The key space was just too small.
So AES increased the key space. We use AES 128 or AES 256 now.
Yes. A 256-bit key has 1.1 times 10 to the 77th power possible combinations. That number is roughly equivalent to the number of atoms in the observable universe.
That is mind-boggling.
If you took every computer currently existing on Earth and had them guess billions of keys per second, the universe would suffer heat death before they brute-forced an AES 256 key.
But it's not just the length, right? It's how the algorithm scrambles the data. AES is a block cipher.
Correct. It doesn't encrypt data one letter at a time. It chops your file into 128-bit blocks. Then it subjects each block to a series of mathematical transformations called rounds. It substitutes bytes using a complex lookup table. It shifts the rows of data. It mixes the columns using matrix multiplication. And then it XORs the data with a portion of the secret key.
It's like a blender.
And it does this entire chaotic dance 10, 12, or 14 times in a row, depending on the key size. The result is absolute mathematically irreducible noise. And crucially, because it uses highly optimized repetitive mathematical operations, modern computer processors can execute AES incredibly fast.
Okay, so symmetric encryption is mathematically unbreakable if the key is long enough, and it is blindingly fast. I can encrypt a terabyte hard drive with AES, and I won't even notice a performance drop. So here is my challenge for you. If symmetric encryption is perfect, why did the architects invent anything else? Why complicate it?
Because of the fatal flaw of the physical lock analogy, it suffers from the key distribution problem. If Alice and Bob want to use the same secret key, how do they agree on what that key is in the first place?
Alice just emails it to Bob.
But the internet is untrusted. If Alice emails the secret key in plain text, an attacker monitoring the network sniffs the packet, reads the key, and now the attacker can decrypt every single message Alice and Bob ever send. Alice cannot use the untrusted network to securely share the key needed to secure the untrusted network. It is a paradox.
The chicken and the egg of cryptography. If they can't physically meet in a dark alley to hand over a USB drive with the key, they can never establish a secure channel. This paradox paralyzed digital communication for years until the invention of asymmetric encryption, or public key cryptography. This is, in my opinion, one of the greatest intellectual achievements of the 20th century.
It is entirely revolutionary. Asymmetric encryption throws out the idea of a single shared key. Instead, Every participant generates a mathematically linked pair of keys, a public key and a private key.
The classic analogy here is the mailbox on the street corner. Think of the public key as the open slot on the front of the blue mailbox. The private key is the literal brass key that the mail carrier holds to unlock the back of the box and retrieve the letters. You can take your public key, the slot, and share it with the entire world. You can put it on your Twitter bio, put it on a billboard, email it to hackers. It does not matter because the public key can only do one thing. It can encrypt data. It can push letters into the box. It cannot take them out.
Exactly. The mathematics are a one-way trapdoor. If Bob wants to send Alice a highly confidential message, Bob finds Alice's openly published public key. Bob uses that key to encrypt the document. The moment the algorithm finishes, the data is locked. And here is the mind-bending part. Once Bob encrypts it with Alice's public key, even Bob himself cannot decrypt it.
That is so weird to think about.
The only thing in the universe that can reverse the math and reveal the plain text is the corresponding private key, which Alice keeps safely isolated on her local machine.
It is absolute magic.
Yeah.
How does the math actually work to create that trapdoor? The architecture relies on algorithms like RSA, named after Rivest, Shamir, and Adelman.
RSA relies on the mathematical difficulty of prime factorization. It is very easy for a computer to take two massive prime numbers, say 300 digits long each, and multiply them together to get an even more massive 600-digit number. That is a fast calculation. But if I just give a computer the 600-digit number and say, find the two prime numbers that multiply together to create this, it is computationally infeasible. It would take classical computers thousands of years. The public key is the massive multiplied number. The private key contains the two original primes.
We also see the architecture shifting toward ECC, elliptic curve cryptography. Instead of multiplying primes, it plots points on an elliptic curve over a Cartesian plane and bounces a line around the curve like a billiard ball. The math is far more complex, but the benefit is efficiency. An ECC key of 256 bits offers the exact same security as an RSA key of 372 bits.
Yeah, the key sizes are way smaller.
It requires far less processing power, which is why ECC is heavily used in mobile devices and smart cards.
But there is a massive catch to asymmetric encryption, whether you use RSA or ECC. The math is incredibly computationally heavy. It is hundreds or thousands of times slower than symmetric encryption. You tried to stream a 4K Netflix movie using asymmetric encryption, your computer's processor would max out and melt. You get about 1 frame every 5 seconds. It is too slow for bulk data.
So let me recap the architectural dilemma. We have symmetric encryption like AES, which is blindingly fast but suffers from the fatal key distribution problem. And we have asymmetric encryption, RSA or ECC, which brilliantly solves the key distribution problem, but is hopelessly slow. How do we get the internet to actually work securely?
We architect a hybrid system. We use the strengths of one to cancel out the weaknesses of the other. This is exactly how TLS, Transport Layer Security, the protocol behind the padlock icon in your web browser, actually functions.
Walk me through a TLS handshake. I want to buy a pair of shoes online. I connect to the web server. What happens under the hood?
When your browser connects to the shoe store, the server immediately sends down its asymmetric public key in the form of a digital certificate. Your browser verifies it. Now, your browser wants to send your credit card data securely, but it wants to do it fast. So your computer generates a brand new, highly complex, but temporary symmetric key, a session key.
Okay, the fast lock.
Right. But your computer can't just send that fast key to the server in plain text. So your computer takes that tiny symmetric session key and it encrypts it using the server's slow asymmetric public key. It pushes the session key through the mailbox slot. Your computer sends this encrypted package to the server. The server uses its highly guarded private key to decrypt the package, revealing the fast symmetric session key.
Boom. The key distribution problem is solved. Both my computer and the server now possess the exact same fast symmetric key, and no one on the network could intercept it because it was protected by the asymmetric trapdoor during transit.
Precisely. Once that handshake is complete, they throw away the asymmetric keys for the remainder of the session, and all the actual data, your credit card, the images of the shoes, the HTML code, is encrypted back and forth using the blindingly fast symmetric AES key. When you close the browser tab, the session key is destroyed. It is an incredibly elegant architectural solution.
Okay, we have covered confidentiality deeply. But we have to talk about integrity. How do we mathematically prove that data hasn't been altered? This brings us to a totally different class of cryptography, which is Hashing algorithms.
Hashing is vital to understand because it behaves fundamentally differently than encryption. Encryption is a two-way street. You scramble data into ciphertext with the explicit intent of unscrambling it later. Hashing is a strict one-way street. It is irreversible by design.
The slide deck for this material calls a hash a fixed-length digital fingerprint. My favorite analogy for a hash function is an industrial blender. Imagine you have a document, and for the analogy, the document is an apple. You drop the apple into the blender and hit puree. What comes out is applesauce. The process is a hash function. The applesauce is the hash value, or the digest. It is physically impossible to unblend the applesauce and reassemble the original apple.
That is the one-way property. But the defining mathematical property of a cryptographic hash, like the SHA-256 algorithm, is the fixed-length output. If you take a text file containing exactly one word, hello, and run it through SHA-256, the algorithm will output a seemingly random string of exactly 64 hexadecimal characters. If you take the entire digitized text of the Library of Congress, literally terabytes of data, and run it through SHA-256, it will output a string of exactly 64 characters. The output size never changes.
And the most important feature for integrity is the avalanche effect. If I take the Library of Congress and I change exactly one comma on page 10,000 and I hash it again,
the resulting 64-character hash will look completely and utterly different from the first one. There is no overlapping pattern. A tiny change in the input cascades into a massive change in the output. This is how we prove integrity. If a software company releases a critical operating system update, they post the file on their server, and next to it, they post the SHA-256 hash of that file. When you download the gigabyte-sized update, your computer runs it through the SHA-256 blender locally. If your resulting hash perfectly matches the hash posted on the website, you know with absolute mathematical certainty that not a single byte of the file was corrupted during download, and no attacker intercepted the file and injected a backdoor into it.
it is the ultimate wax seal. But hashing has another critical architectural use, which is password storage. This blew my mind when I first understood the mechanics. A secure website, a bank, or a social media platform never actually stores your password in their database.
Never. If a database stores passwords in plain text, and the database is breached by hackers, the hackers instantly have millions of passwords to use in credential stuffing attacks. Instead, a competent architecture hashes the passwords. When you create an account and type summer 2024, the server takes that password, throws it in the SHA-256 blender, and only stores the resulting 64-character applesauce in the database.
So when I log in the next day, how does the server know my password is right if it doesn't know my password?
When you type your password into the login box, the server takes that live input, throws it into the blender again, and generates a new hash. It then compares that new hash against the hash it saved in the database during registration. If the hashes match exactly, the math dictates that the inputs must have been identical. The server grants you access without ever knowing your password. If a hacker breaches the database, all they steal is a list of millions of hashes. They cannot unblend them to figure out the passwords.
I'm going to push back here because I know hackers have found a way around this. They use something called rainbow tables, right? If a hacker knows the hash for password 123, they can just look for that hash in the stolen database.
That is correct. Hackers realize that since hashing is deterministic, meaning the same input always produces the same output, they could just pre-compute the hashes for billions of common passwords and compile them into a massive lookup table called a rainbow table. If they steal a database of hashes, they just cross-reference it. Oh, hash number 7B4C matches the pre-computed hash for password 123. I cracked the account.
So how does the security architecture defend against rainbow tables?
By introducing a concept called salting. Before the server drops your password into the blender, it generates a long, completely random string of characters, the salt, and appends it to your password. So summer 2024 becomes summer 2024 byte 9F8Q2PL.
Right.
The server then hashes that entire combined string and stores the hash alongside the plaintext salt.
What does that accomplish?
It completely destroys the rainbow table. Because the salt is unique and random for every single user, the attacker's pre-computed table is useless. The attacker would have to compute a brand new rainbow table for every single user account based on their unique salt, which takes an impossibly long time. Salting forces the attacker to crack passwords one by one, manually, rather than instantly cracking thousands through a lookup table.
That is a brilliant escalation in the arms race. Okay, one final cryptographic concept to tie this all together: digital signatures. We discussed how asymmetric encryption uses the public key to lock data, so only the private key can open it. Digital signatures run that entire paradigm in reverse to prove identity.
Yes. We use the private key to lock and the public key to unlock. Let's say I write a highly sensitive contract and I want to guarantee two things: non-repudiation, which is proving that I, and only I, authored it, and integrity, proving it wasn't altered.
First, you run the document through the SHA-256 blender to get the fixed-length hash fingerprint.
Exactly. Then I take that hash fingerprint and I encrypt it using my highly guarded asymmetric private key. That encrypted hash is my digital signature. I attach it to the bottom of the plaintext document and send the whole package to you.
When I receive it, I want to verify it. I know your open public key. I use your public key to decrypt the signature block.
And here's the magic. If my public key successfully decrypts that block, it proves mathematically that the block must have been encrypted by my specific private key. Because I am the only person on Earth who holds that private key, you have absolute proof that I am the author. The identity is verified.
And to check the integrity, my computer takes the plain text document you sent, runs it through the SHA-256 blender itself, and compares its result to the hash that I just decrypted from your signature. If they match, it proves the document wasn't tampered with. Identity and integrity verified simultaneously by math. It is flawless architecture.
It is the invisible scaffolding of trust that holds the entire global economy together. Every time you download software, every time your computer connects to a banking API, these digital signatures and certificate authorities are operating in milliseconds to prove trust.
But, and there's always a but in cybersecurity, everything we have discussed for the past chunk of time, the CIA Triad, firewalls, ACLs, implicit deny, Active Directory groups, UAC, MFA, and this beautiful cryptography, was all architected for a world that is rapidly ceasing to exist.
Yeah.
We have to move to the final stage of our deep dive, the modern battlefield. The architecture of the network itself is failing.
It is failing because the fundamental premise of the old architecture was the perimeter, the castle and moat model. In the 90s and 2000s, the corporate office was the castle. The firewall was the moat. If you were sitting at a desk inside the castle connected to the local Ethernet, you were trusted. You were allowed to access the file servers. If you were out on the internet, you were untrusted, and the firewall blocked you. It was geographic trust.
But the perimeter is dead. It evaporated.
Exactly. Where is the perimeter today? The data isn't in a server room in the basement. It is distributed across AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. The applications aren't installed locally. They are SaaS platforms like Salesforce and Microsoft 365. And the users aren't in the castle. They're working from home, logging in from a coffee shop in Paris, or checking email on their personal smartphones while riding the subway. The perimeter exploded outward into millions of endpoints.
In a world without walls, how do you defend the data? The old model of using a VPN, a virtual private network, was essentially trying to build a long, secure tunnel from the coffee shop in Paris directly back through the castle wall. But VPNs are terrifying from a security perspective now, aren't they?
They are, because they rely on the old perimeter logic. If a threat actor breaches a user's laptop in Paris, and that laptop connects to the corporate VPN, the threat actor is now inside the castle walls. And because the internal network is often flat and deeply trusting, the attacker can move laterally. They can pivot from the laptop to the printer, to the HR server, to the domain controller. The VPN granted broad geographic trust to a compromised endpoint.
So enterprise architecture had to evolve to assume that the network is always hostile. The doctrine is assume breach. You have to assume the threat actor is already inside the network sitting right next to your database. How do you mitigate that? The material highlights a framework called PAM, Privileged Access Management.
If the threat actor is already inside, their goal is to escalate privileges. They want to find an administrator account because admin credentials give them the keys to the kingdom. PAM is a dedicated, highly hardened security vault placed strictly around those God mode accounts.
And a core component of PAM, which addresses the persistence of these accounts, is JIT, just-in-time access. I love this concept. Explain why traditional admin accounts are so dangerous and how JIT fixes it.
Historically, if you were a senior systems engineer, your user account had global administrator privileges permanently attached to it, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Even when you were on vacation in the Bahamas drinking a margarita, your account sitting dormant in the directory had the power to wipe the entire corporate infrastructure. That standing privilege is a massive attack surface. If a threat actor phished your credentials at 3 a.m. on a Sunday, they could instantly execute a ransomware payload with full admin rights.
So JIT introduces the concept of ephemeral credentials.
Yes. Under just-in-time architecture, nobody has standing admin privileges. Even the most senior engineer operates day-to-day with a standard user token. They can read their email, but they can't change server configs. When that engineer legitimately needs to perform maintenance on a database, they log into the PAM portal and request elevation.
It's a checkout process.
Exactly. They state their justification like, I am implementing patch 4.2 based on Jira ticket 899, and they request access for exactly 2 hours. A manager might have to click approve in a mobile app. Once approved, the PAM system dynamically grants the engineer an administrator token. They do their work. And here is the crucial part. After exactly 2 hours, the PAM system automatically revokes the token. The privileges vaporize. The account reverts to a standard user.
It's Cinderella. The carriage turns back into a pumpkin when the clock strikes midnight.
Wow.
If a hacker breaches that engineer's account at 3:40 a.m. on a Sunday, they get absolutely nothing because the privileges literally do not exist at that time. It shrinks the attack surface from 247 down to maybe 2 hours a week.
It is phenomenal risk reduction. But PAM is just one piece of the ultimate architectural philosophy that dominates modern cybersecurity, which is zero trust.
Zero trust. The tagline is never trust, always verify. It takes the concept of implicit deny that we discussed earlier with ACLs and applies it to the entire global network. It assumes every user, every device, and every network connection is hostile, regardless of whether they are sitting at a desk in the corporate headquarters or at a coffee shop.
That is the core paradigm shift. Trust is no longer derived from your location or your network segment. Trust is continuously evaluated based on context.
But let me challenge this with the friction argument again. If the system treats me like a hostile hacker even when I am in the office, and it demands verification every single time I click a folder or open an app, isn't that totally paralyzing? How does a company function as employees are constantly locked out by a paranoid architecture?
That is the greatest hurdle in implementing zero trust. If you do it poorly, it is a nightmare of constant MFA push notifications. But a properly architected zero trust network access environment makes this continuous verification practically invisible to the user by leveraging context and telemetry.
Walk me through a real-world workflow. How does invisible continuous verification work?
Let's say you log in at 9:00 a.m. from your corporate-issued laptop. The system authenticates you using single sign-on and your YubiKey hardware token. You are in, you start working, you don't see any more prompts. But behind the scenes, a policy engine is continuously monitoring dozens of data points. It asks, is this laptop running the latest version of the corporate EDR antivirus? Yes. Is the firewall active? Yes. Is the IP address originating from a known geographic location? Yes. Is the user accessing files that fit their historical behavioral profile? Yes. As long as those silent telemetry checks return positive results, your trust score remains high, and you experience zero friction.
The bouncer isn't stopping you at every door. The bouncer is just watching you closely on the security cameras as you walk the halls.
Exactly. But let's say at 2:00 p.m., a piece of malware silently disables the antivirus service on your laptop. Or let's say you suddenly try to download 10 gigabytes of highly classified source code, something your profile has never done before. The moment that context changes, the policy engine dynamically drops your trust score in real time.
And what happens? Does he just kill my session?
It can adapt dynamically. The system might immediately sever your connection to the source code repository. Or it might step up the authentication requirement, throwing a sudden prompt on your screen saying, anomalous behavior detected. Please tap your YubiKey and provide a biometric scan to re-verify your identity before proceeding. If a threat actor is remotely piloting your session, they fail that challenge and the attack is stopped dead.
And this ties heavily into microsegmentation, right? We talked about how VPNs let you roam freely. How does Zero Trust handle network movement?
Zero Trust utilizes software-defined networking to replace the single giant moat with thousands of tiny, impenetrable bubbles. Every single application, database, and workload is placed inside its own microsegment.
So even if I'm fully authenticated inside the network, I am in a bubble.
Yes. If you need to talk to the HR server, your device must establish a secure, encrypted tunnel specifically to the HR server, and the policy engine must explicitly authorize that exact connection based on your role. If a threat actor compromises your laptop, they are trapped inside your specific bubble. They cannot scan the network, they cannot ping the database, and they cannot move laterally because the microsegmentation firewalls block all traffic that isn't explicitly defined by an implicit deny policy. The blast radius of a breach is contained to a single endpoint.
We have journeyed through the entire evolution of defense. We started with the theoretical goals of the CIA Triad, balancing confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We examined how to manage risk and how administrative policies mandate the technical controls. We broke down the immense complexity of identity and access management, understanding why networks default to the pessimism of implicit deny, and how tools like UAC make the principle of least privilege tolerable for humans. We explored the vulnerabilities of SMS MFA and the hardware brilliance of FIDO2 keys. We dove deep into the mathematics of cryptography, the blazing speed of AES block ciphers, the revolutionary key exchange of asymmetric RSA trapdoors, and the immutable digital fingerprints of SHA-256 hashing. And finally, we dismantled the perimeter and stepped into the continuous context-aware, paranoid reality of zero-trust architecture and just-in-time access.
It is a phenomenal, ever-evolving ecosystem, but to truly understand it, we have to recognize its foundational dependency. Everything we have discussed today, the microsegmentation, the complex encryption, the policy engines, ultimately rests on a single point of failure: the ability to mathematically prove that a human being is who they claim to be. The entire architecture of trust assumes that identity is a solvable problem.
And for a long time, it was. We layered something you know with something you have. And the ultimate trump card was always something you are. Biometrics, the unique geometry of your face, the pattern of your retina, the specific cadence of your voice. We assumed biology was the unbreakable anchor of digital identity.
But look at the trajectory of the next 5 years. We are entering an era where artificial intelligence is dismantling that anchor. Generative AI models can clone the exact timbre and inflection of a CEO's voice from a 3-second YouTube clip. Deepfake video technology can superimpose a photorealistic, mathematically perfect replication of an employee's face onto a live video call, complete with micro-expressions and blinking. The algorithms are learning to perfectly mimic something you are.
So what happens to the architecture? If a threat actor uses an AI model to successfully bypass facial recognition or bypass voice authentication on a corporate help desk call to execute a SIM swap,
if the biometrics fail, if the system can no longer distinguish between the biological human and the algorithmic synthetic replica, then the entire architecture of trust we just spent an hour building collapses on itself. You can have the most advanced zero-trust network in the world, but if the AI perfectly impersonates the authorized user at the point of authentication, the system will gladly hand over the keys. The defining security challenge of the next decade won't be writing better encryption algorithms. It will be completely reinventing the philosophical and technical definition of human identity in a synthetic world. How do you prove you are you when a machine can be you better than you can?
Now that is a terrifying and fascinating thought to mull over the next time you hold your phone up to scan your face. Thank you for joining us on this incredibly deep dive into the architecture of trust. We'll see you next time.